The envelope crinkled in my hand, stiff with age and resentment. It smelled faintly of dust and old printer ink. Inside was a neatly typed invoice: rent owed, electricity used, meals consumed starting from when I was 12. No note, no signature. Just a final amount, $86,400. Outside, the cicadas buzzed in the dry Indiana air. My parents sat silently on the porch sipping coffee, as if they'd just handed me a weather report, not a bill for my childhood. Where in the world are you listening from, and would you have paid it or sent your own invoice back? Subscribe for more from Sophia's revenge stories. I started owing my parents long before I even understood what that word meant. It began with things like chores, doing dishes while my little brother played video games, cleaning the bathroom because you're the girl in the house. At 12, they said I was old enough to pay my share. They meant it as a joke. I laughed, but the requests kept coming. By 14, I was babysitting the neighbor's twins to contribute to groceries. I handed over the crumpled 20s every Friday night, while Dad counted them silently at the kitchen table, cigarette glowing in one hand. No thank you, no acknowledgement, just, "You live here, it's only fair, Eb." They always made it sound logical. "We're not rich, Sophia. You're old enough to understand responsibility. Family pulls together, but together always meant me." The first time I earned money, I was 12. I spent weekends folding brochures at the local print shop, under the table cash, $5 an hour. I had dreams of buying a secondhand MP3 player, maybe even a pair of sneakers that weren't hand-me-downs. Instead, the morning after my first payday, Mom sat at the kitchen table with the electric bill spread out like a crime scene. "The cutoff notice came," she sighed. "And your father forgot again. How much did you get yesterday?" I froze. $20, I said, stupidly proud. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Perfect. You're old enough to help now." She took the money, folded it neatly, and slid it under the paperclip of the overdue bill, like it belonged there. I didn't cry, just nodded, like I understood. I celebrated my 15th birthday with a store-brand cupcake and a thin white envelope from my grandmother, $40 cash. I kept it under my mattress for 3 days, until Mom found it while doing laundry. "Don't hide things from us, Soph. That's not how families work." Then she handed the money to Dad, who needed gas for work. No card, no candle, just another quiet withdrawal from a daughter too polite to say no. By 17, I knew the pattern. Jobs weren't for savings. Birthdays weren't for joy. Everything I received was potential help for a household, always 1 week from collapse. I didn't rebel, didn't scream. I just learned that being a good daughter meant never calling it theft, even when it felt like I was being itemized. I was the one skipping field trips, turning down track team, working part-time at the diner while my brother got a car for his 16th birthday. He never owed a cent. When I got my first full-time job at 22, a bland office role at an insurance company, I offered to help with rent and bills. Mom suggested we open a joint account. "For emergencies," she said, squeezing my hand. I didn't realize until much later that my paychecks funded their Amazon orders, streaming subscriptions, car repairs, and nights out. Our house always had a quiet desperation in its walls, not messy but tired. Stains under the baseboards, outlets that buzzed when you plugged in a charger, a fridge that hummed too loud like it wanted to scream. It was a house held together with duct tape and my deposits. But I stayed, because leaving felt like betrayal. Because I thought maybe one day they'd look at me and see more than a wallet. Because part of me still believed in the word home. The day I told them I was moving out, Mom looked up from her crossword and said, "Well, don't expect us to beg." Dad just muttered, "You'll be back in 6 months when your savings dry up." I gave 30 days notice. I packed quietly. I paid the last utility bill. And on the final morning, they handed me that envelope, like it was dessert after dinner, like the last laugh in a long-running joke that was never funny to begin with. I didn't say anything. I just folded the invoice back into its sleeve and walked out. The screen door creaked behind me, snapping shut like the end of a sentence. 3 days after I moved into the new apartment, an email from my mother landed in my inbox. Subject: follow-up on balance. No greeting, no warmth, just a single line. Please remit $86,400 via direct transfer. This is non-negotiable. Attached was the same invoice. Only this time the words "final warning" were stamped across the top in bright red. They'd even included a deadline: 10 days. I stared at it for a full minute, then closed the laptop and made myself tea. The kind with too much ginger and not enough honey. The bitterness suited the moment. When I didn't respond, the calls started. Blocked numbers, voicemails dripping in manufactured hurt. Dad's voice raspy and indignant. "We gave you everything. Now you repay us by running away with our money." As if love had ever been part of the transaction. I played the messages on mute, watching the closed captions scroll by like a courtroom transcript. No apology, no curiosity about how I was doing, just collections. On the 7th day, I got a text from my cousin. "Hey, your folks say they're going to sue. Is that real?" I didn't answer, but my stomach tightened like it knew something my brain hadn't caught up to yet. That evening, the doorbell rang. It was just past sunset. Outside, the sky was bruised purple, the hallway washed in that sterile, flickering light cheap apartments always have. A man in khakis and a polo shirt handed me a large envelope. His smile was apologetic. "You've been served," he said. Inside was a notice of intent to file civil charges. Claim unpaid familial debt. Plaintiff: Roy and Marlene Darnell. They weren't just serious. They were weaponizing parenthood, turning childhood into collateral. I sat down on the edge of the bed, envelope in hand. The silence in the room felt thicker than walls. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about rewriting history. And I was done letting them hold the pen. By the weekend, the story had gone public. My Aunt Marjorie posted on Facebook. "Some children forget who raised them. Disgusting what money does to people." Comments rolled in fast, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years calling me heartless, manipulative, ungrateful. One cousin wrote, "Imagine suing your own parents after all they did for you." I almost laughed. What they did was put my name on utility bills, then cry poverty when I moved out. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into the cloud drive I'd kept private for years. Folder Darnell Records. Inside, lease agreements, screenshots of bank transfers, a photo of me 17 fixing the water heater in the dead of winter. My hands red and raw from the cold. I selected 6 files. Attached them to an email. Subject: clarification. I sent it to Marjorie, 3 cousins, and my brother. No text in the body, just the documents. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hi, you don't know me, but I'm your parents' neighbor. I thought you might want this." Attached was a photo. It showed me on the roof 2 summers ago, balancing on a ladder holding shingles under my arm, while my father lounged below shirtless, holding a beer. My knees buckled slightly. The picture was time-stamped, the resolution grainy but undeniable. I remembered that day, how the rain was coming in sideways, and Mom had told me to hurry, or the ceiling would mold. She'd stayed inside baking muffins for church friends. I'd hammered until my arms ached. Now the photo was making the rounds in town. Another neighbor commented under my aunt's post. "Didn't she pay your heating bill last winter? I remember you told me she saved you from freezing." And suddenly the tide began to turn. Not fully, but cracks were showing. And I didn't have to shout. I just had to keep the records. By Monday morning, my inbox was cleaner. Some relatives had deleted their comments. Others switched to passive silence, the kind that hums with judgment but lacks the courage to speak. I didn't care. I made tea, sat at the tiny kitchen island, and opened my laptop. Then I opened the drawer beneath it. Inside was a worn gray folder held shut by a rubber band so old it crumbled at my touch. Inside that truth: receipts, contracts, signed checks, PDF printouts, every gas bill I'd paid since age 19, every auto repair I'd covered under Mom's emergency, even a grainy screenshot of the family Netflix account under my name with user profiles labeled Dad, Mom, and Movie Night. That was the one that made me pause. I hadn't watched a movie with them in 4 years. The cursor blinked on a blank document. At the top I typed, "Darnell v. Darnell, counterclaim." I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew someone who was. Claire answered on the second ring. Her voice was half caffeine, half steel. "Took you long enough to call," she said. By noon we were sitting at her kitchen table. Claire wore her reading glasses and a hoodie that said, "Truth, everything." I laid out the folder. She didn't speak for 5 minutes, just flipped pages, scribbled notes, clicked her pen. Then finally, "This isn't just messed up. This is financial coercion disguised as parenting." I nodded, but I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet, just clear. Claire leaned back, arms crossed. "Do you want revenge or relief?" she asked. I looked at the last document, a $1,200 emergency transfer I made when Dad forgot his mortgage payment and the house almost defaulted. No thank you, no payback. Just a guilt-laced 2 a.m. phone call. I want it to stop, I said. I want it documented. And I want it to never happen again. She smiled slightly. Then we file. Back. She plugged in a USB, dragged the folder over. As the files transferred, the screen reflected off my tea mug, turning everything gold and cold. Claire asked one last question. If they offer to settle, do you want an apology, or every cent? It didn't take long for the cameras to arrive. At the Saturday farmers market, Mom stood beside a booth of handmade soaps, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Dad loomed behind her, his arm in a sling I knew was fake. We raised her with nothing, and now she treats us like strangers. Her voice trembled just enough to sound practiced. Local reporters hovered nearby, snapping photos, like this was a feel-good tragedy. One headline hit the town paper by dusk. Parents betrayed by daughter over family debt. The comments were instant. How could she? They look so sweet. She must have been brainwashed by outsiders. Claire sent me the link with one line. They're staging a pity war. Don't blink. I didn't. Instead, I posted a single screenshot, my paycheck stub from 6 months ago, with one line highlighted in yellow. Mortgage transfer, $1,216.78. Darnell residence. Date, routing number, my name, their address. No caption, no hashtags, just truth. Within hours, the comments shifted. A woman from my old church wrote, I remember seeing her repainting their house alone one summer. Her dad sat in the shade. Someone else added, I delivered groceries to them twice. It was always her card. By evening, the same local paper updated the article. New details surface in family dispute. Daughter speaks through records. They ran both sides, and for once, both were seen. I walked downtown that night, the air sharp with October cold lampposts buzzing like tired insects. Some neighbors nodded, others avoided my gaze. I didn't mind. Let them pick sides. I wasn't campaigning. I was testifying. Back at Claire's, the email came in. Subject line, response to counterclaim, court accepts motion. The judge had ruled. The case would proceed publicly. No more backroom guilt. No more manipulation and whispers. Claire looked up from her laptop and said, We're going to court, Sophia, and this time you'll have the mic. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the air, the atmosphere. Neutral walls, pale gray carpet, a faint scent of old paper and metal chairs. But what chilled me was this, the sight of my parents sitting across from me like strangers, arms folded, faces blank. Dad avoided eye contact. Mom looked everywhere but at me, but I caught the tremble in her fingers, just enough to know this wasn't going how they thought it would. The clerk read the motion aloud. I barely heard it. My focus narrowed to a single moment, the time I was 17, sitting in the living room after school. When Mom said, We all make sacrifices. Yours just look different. I'd nodded back then, too young to question, too tired to argue. Not anymore. Now I was here not to fight, but to document. To draw a line they wouldn't be allowed to cross again. Claire nudged my elbow gently. The judge cleared his throat. Motion to proceed accepted. Mediation denied. Full hearing scheduled 2 weeks from today. Math. The gavel struck once, a soft, deliberate sound. But to me it was thunder. They wanted to erase my contributions. I was going to engrave them in public record. As we stood to leave, Dad muttered low and sharp, You'll regret this when we're gone. I didn't flinch. I just replied, You taught me to pay what I owe. I'm just returning the favor. We started at Claire's kitchen table, papers spread like war maps. Every page was labeled color-coded, time-stamped. Not for drama, but for clarity. Truth on paper was colder than memory, and more useful. Claire tapped a stack with her pen. We'll group by category: housing, utilities, repairs, emergency aid. She handed me a highlighter. You lead. This is your life. I'm just the translator. So I did, line by line. The pink stack was utilities, power, water, gas. Some in my name since I was 19. The yellow stack, mortgage transfers. Each one paired with an email from Mom asking for a little help this month. The blue folder, emergency expenses. The time Dad blew the transmission on the truck. The ER copay when Mom slipped and didn't want the neighbors to know. We added printed screenshots. Venmo notes? For groceries. Bank notifications. $700 transfer, Darnell joint. Group texts. Don't tell Marjorie, but we're short again. Can you float us? That night after Claire left, I couldn't sleep. So I pulled the old shoebox from the top of my closet, the one I hadn't opened in years. It smelled like dry paper and time. Inside, folded receipts, curled invoices, post-it notes half faded. Not a system, just survival. I sat cross-legged on the floor, spreading the papers out under the yellow glow of a desk lamp. Each one was a breadcrumb, a piece of a pattern I had never dared to name. Near the bottom, I found a pale blue pharmacy slip. $142.67. Dad's antibiotics after a nasty tooth infection. The date was 4 days before my college deposit deadline. I remembered staring at the check I'd saved all senior year and using it instead to cover his meds. I never reapplied. I held the slip like it might evaporate. Not out of anger, but because it was proof I hadn't imagined it. The next morning, Claire walked in, coffee in one hand, ponytail half-tied. She glanced at the paper piles and blinked. Is that a pharmacy receipt from 6 years ago? I nodded. I don't know why I kept it. She smiled, not unkindly. I do. One photo in particular made Claire pause. It was of me crouched in the crawl space holding a flashlight between my teeth while rewrapping insulation around frozen pipes. They had you do that, she asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We arranged the final binder like a presentation deck. Tabs, index, notation sheets. I watched Claire close it with both hands like it was fragile sacred. You don't need to yell, Sophia, she said quietly. You already did the work. Now we show the world what it cost. I nodded once. Some people prepare for court by rehearsing speeches. We prepared by auditing a lifetime. And when the last paper slid into place, I finally let myself exhale. 3 days before the hearing, the noise escalated. Mom posted another long paragraph on Facebook, a ramble about sleepless nights' betrayal, and how she and Dad had only ever wanted the best for me. It ended with, "Pray for our daughter. She's lost herself to bitterness." The comments were mixed now. Some offered prayers, others didn't. One read, "We all saw her cleaning their gutters in February, while her dad drank beer on the porch. Funny how no one remembers that now." I didn't respond. Claire warned me. "They're baiting you. Don't bite. This isn't social media. This is court." So I stayed quiet online. But in private, I sharpened my facts like knives. We prepped responses for every potential attack. Ungrateful, we had records. Manipulative, here were the transfers. Abandonment. Here's a breakdown of every month I paid, their mortgage, instead of saving for my own. Claire reviewed courtroom posture. Keep your tone flat. Look at the judge, not them. If they get emotional, you stay still. Let their chaos expose itself. We practiced in her living room. Her dog snored softly in the corner while I read out loud. In 2019, I covered 4 consecutive electric bills during a blackout winter. Attached our bank confirmations and emailed requests. Claire nodded. Perfect. Now pause. Let that land. I did, and the silence after was heavy but right. On the night before court, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the apartment window watching fog creep across the parking lot. My phone buzzed once, Dad. Then again, Mom. Then a third time, blocked number. I let it ring out. Then came the text. Whatever happens tomorrow, remember we were your parents first. No apology, no ownership. Just a final guilt trip. Like a last grenade lobbed before surrender. I turned the phone over face down. I wasn't here to win a war. I was here to document who fired first. The courthouse smelled like old ink and disinfectant. The lights buzzed overhead, too white, too steady. I sat beside Claire at the plaintiff's table, watching as my parents were sworn in. Dad wore a suit 2 sizes too tight. Mom clutched her tissue like a lifeline. Neither looked at me. The judge was efficient, direct. "Ms. Darnell, please state the nature of your counterclaim." Claire stood. "We are responding to a false debt claim with documented proof of long-term financial exploitation, including over $80,000 in verifiable payments toward housing utilities and household support provided by Ms. Darnell since the age of 17. She passed the binder to the clerk. It landed on the table with a solid thud. Tangible, undeniable. One by one, the pages were reviewed. Each invoice, each screenshot, each transfer. Mom blinked rapidly. Dad's jaw flexed, but neither spoke. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do the plaintiffs contest these documents?" Their lawyer, some cousin's friend, mumbled something about emotional obligation. The judge didn't even nod. He looked at me. "Do you wish to proceed with restitution?" I met his gaze, clear, calm. "No, just recognition." From my folder, I slid a single sheet forward, a copy of the original invoice my parents gave me. I'd added one thing, a red stamp in the corner. Paid in full. Claire handed it to the court officer. The room fell still. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't rage. It was an audit of love mistaken for obligation. And I had closed the books. When we exited the courtroom, reporters lingered. Microphones hovered. I didn't stop. Claire answered one question. No comment. The record speaks for itself. As we walked into this brisk fall sun, leaves rustling at our feet, she turned to me and asked, "How do you feel?" I exhaled, like I finally moved out. The news spread faster than I thought. By nightfall, the court documents had been uploaded to the public record. Claire said it was standard procedure. But to me it felt symbolic, everything they tried to bury, now lit under fluorescent truth. The same aunt who called me ungodly last month quietly deleted her Facebook post. Another cousin texted, "I didn't know the full story. Hope you're okay." I didn't answer. The court hadn't ordered restitution. No one lost their house, but they'd lost their narrative. And in a town like Harvest Falls, that's worse. I walked into the grocery store 2 days later, and the cashier, a high school girl with chipped nail polish and earbuds, looked up, paused, then said, "You're the girl with the invoice, right?" I braced myself. She smiled. That was badass. I blinked, then nodded once. Thanks. I didn't need applause, but I wasn't invisible anymore. And I wasn't their scapegoat. Back home, I sat at my tiny dining table sorting mail. Among the utility bills and pizza coupons was an envelope with no return address. Inside was a check, $1, in the memo line. For everything. The handwriting was my father's. I placed it in a drawer and didn't touch it again. Some days later, Mom called. Blocked number. I let it ring until it stopped. Then she texted, "We're family, Sophia. At some point you'll need us again." This time I didn't just ignore it. I blocked the number, permanently. Not out of hate, but because even silence deserves protection. Rebuilding didn't feel like fire or triumph. It felt like routine. Like remembering how to make eggs without feeling rushed. Like sitting in a chair and not waiting for someone to ask for something. I started going on morning walks. Nothing dramatic, just the perimeter of the block where the sidewalk cracked beneath maple roots and mailboxes leaned like tired old men. I bought a second-hand bookshelf, painted it sage green, lined it with all the books I used to lend my parents and never got back. Now I replaced them one by one, not because I needed to reread them, but because I could. Claire stopped by on Sundays. Sometimes we said nothing for long stretches. Just sat on the balcony sharing bad coffee and better silence. One evening as dusk poured through the blinds, I found the copy of the invoice again. The one they sent me, the one I'd stamped. Paid in full. I framed it, not for revenge, not to mock them, but to remind myself that I'd once believed love had to be earned with service. And I'd finally returned that debt to sender. I placed the frame above my desk, right next to a post-it note that simply read, "Nothing owed, nothing owned." Later that week, I saw a car I didn't recognize parked across the street. My stomach flipped, but no one knocked, no letter arrived, no call came. I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't surviving, I was living. Some nights, I still woke with my jaw clenched. The old instinct listening for footsteps in the hallway, for someone asking me for something I couldn't afford to give. But then the stillness reminded me there was no hallway, no unpaid balance, only me and the sound of quiet being kind. A month later, I hosted my first dinner. Just me, Claire. A pot of overcooked pasta and 2 mismatched plates from a thrift store. We ate by the window, knees curled up on stools, the smell of garlic still hanging in the air. "You know," Claire said, twirling her fork, "most people don't win against their parents. Not like that." I shrugged. It wasn't about winning, I just stopped losing. She nodded, then raised her glass. "To freedom," she said. I clinked mine gently, "to clarity." After she left, I rinsed the plates, wiped the counters, then sat alone in the stillness. No voices calling me selfish. No eyes demanding more. Just peace earned, not given. On my desk beneath the framed invoice, I placed a note for myself. A single line. Family isn't who raised you. It's who never charged you for love. The next morning, I donated the last box of childhood clutter. Old school awards, yellowed report cards, a letter from Mom saying I owed her my future. I didn't burn it. I let it go, because not everything has to be destroyed to be released. Sometimes freedom is quieter than rage. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's just finished. 1 year passed quietly. No more courtrooms, no more voicemails, just the slow stitching back of a self I hadn't realized had unraveled. I moved into a better apartment, still modest, but with southern light that poured through the windows like peace itself. I grew herbs on the windowsill, basil mostly. It wilted in winter, came back stronger in spring. Claire and I stayed close. She convinced me to speak just once at a workshop she hosted for young women facing coercive family dynamics. I nearly said no, but something in me wanted to look someone else in the eye and say, "You're not wrong for drawing the line." I didn't tell the full story, just enough. I ended with, "You're not selfish for saving yourself." After the session, a girl approached me, maybe 19. Hands in sleeves, voice barely above a whisper. "My parents say I have to pay rent even while I'm still in high school. Or I have to leave." She didn't ask a question. She just looked at me like I might know what to do. I reached into my tote bag, pulled out a folded copy of the same invoice my parents once gave me. I'd written something new on the back in thick black ink. "You don't owe for love." I handed it to her. "Make your own copy when you're ready." She smiled, not with her mouth, just her shoulders relaxing for the first time. That night, I walked home alone under street lamps, humming like old friends. There were no locks behind me, no ghosts pacing the hallway, just the quiet certainty that some of us are not here to inherit legacies, but to break them gently and build something better in their place. Have you ever had to break your own bloodline to reclaim your breath? Would you have walked away or sent the invoice back? This was Sophia's revenge story. What would you have done? Comment below and subscribe for more. Your story might be next.